Welcome to the Director's Podium. I'm your host, Adam Christie. Oh, people, today our guest is sensational. She is somebody you can really look up to, and you're about to see why. She holds degrees from Westminster Choir College and is the former director of Temple University's Women's Chorus and MUED professor. Last semester, she taught at Rowan University. Prior to her college positions, she taught at Cherry Hill West High School, where she grew the choral program from 60 to 70, nope. 80, nope. 200, nope. She grew the program from 60 to 325 students.
Are you kidding me?
Her materials are available through Hal Leonard, and they are Vocal Transformation, Where the Boys Are, Front-Loading Your Choral Rehearsal, and Constructing for Success. She's a legend. I know I say that often, but that's because I have great guests, but she is a legend. Please join me in welcoming Christine Bass. Christine, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you. I don't think I'm legendary at all, but thank you for having me.
Oh my gosh, just trying to get through all your accolades. Jeez, I need more paper. Christine, can you tell us, how long were you teaching for, and what made you want to be a teacher?
Well, I graduated way back in the dark ages in 1975 from Westminster and started teaching right away. And I started at Long Branch Junior High School, and that was a 7th through 9th grade. That really dates me, when they still had that instead of middle schools. And I think one of the stories I'm going to tell real quick is I probably would not still be in teaching if I had not had 7th grade music cycles, like general music cycles, where you had the kids for like 7 or 8 weeks, and then you got a new bunch and you could start over and a new bunch and start over, because my first cycle with those first kids was horrible. I was the worst teacher. And if I hadn't had a chance to kind of restart several times in that first year, I don't think I'd still be teaching. I don't think I could have survived it. That and my husband's guidance. So anyways, don't give up first year teachers. And let's see, that makes about 45 years that I've been teaching, which is kind of really wacky. And you asked what made you want to teach. And I think it was back in high school, it was between sociology, which was a new degree back at that time, and choral music. And I was really afraid to go into choral music. And then my mentor at our church, I had gone through, all the years of church and was a senior, asked me to lead a group of girls in the traditional Christmas Eve, thing that they did every time for our service. We had a huge church, like 400 people in the choirs and stuff. And so I got the chance to warm them up and rehearse them. And I was like, ooh, I really like this, And I think that's kind of what gave me that little nudge of maybe this is something that you could do, So yeah.
So you had taken piano lessons before that then?
Yes, I started piano when I was 5 years old, like all good little kids. And but then I stopped when I was in 9th grade because I was too cool for piano. Although I had gotten to a pretty good level and, could play by ear as well, which is kind of unusual because I was never taught by ear. But yeah, so that's one of my wishes, that my parents had kind of said, no, you're going to stick to this through high school. But high school got really busy. And so piano fell to the wayside. And then when I got to Westminster, had to, bump it back up.
What do you think makes a great teacher?
Crazy question. I think there are so many aspects to that are really crucial. And in choral music, I think you've got to have the chops. You've got to have a real strong sense of vocal technique, of choral rehearsal, of, great repertoire. You've got to be confident enough on the piano, but really confident vocally. I think that really serves your students. But as far as a great teacher, I would say somebody who can spot and develop talent, who looks at their students as all potentials and sees what they can be, not just what they are, and knows how to nurture that and draw that out. And then I would say somebody who encourages all learners. You have to be an encourager if you're going to be a great teacher, because they don't walk in there with yay, I can do this. This is good. I'm all ready to roll. You have to dig that in them and pull that out and allow them to see, oh, look what you did. Now let's go to here, And so to be a real encourager, I think is very important. And then somebody who, just knows how to spot leadership and encourage student delegation and eventually student ownership, so that it's not about you, it's about what the kids are doing, and they're taking the reins and they have decided to move this thing forward, and they have the motivation. When you get to that point, you're a good teacher, because you are no longer doing the job. It's all a team effort. And then the other thing I will say, and this is really tricky in choral music and dealing with musicians who invest so much time in their own art and their own skills, is to not be in it for yourself at all. I mean, I always used to tell my choirs, the audience sees my back. It's not about me. Okay, it's about you and what you're going to bring to the table and what you're going to communicate. So I think the whole, being humble, not building to yourself or your ego or this is my program, da, da, da. But, it's all about the kids. It's all about what you can create in them and help them do. So you're a facilitator. You are not the, kingpin in the whole thing. So that's, I think, a really important part of leadership, because your kids will actually sense that about you and be drawn in.
So, except for the pedagogy part, those seem to be traits that could apply to all teachers. Would you agree?
Yes, I think so. That kids are a real great, intuitive barometer of who they can read people. They can read the teacher. They can tell whether the teacher is in it for the student or for themselves. And that's something that just is really imperative. You should not go into education if you want to become somebody who's well liked, respected, da da da, all that stuff. That should not be your goal. I mean, it's a nice side, but it's not. It shouldn't be your goal.
Just curious, what was your morning routine before school?
Well, the alarm clock, and I'm retired now, so I am so glad I am not in this morning routine. Early alarm. I'm always, one of the mottos in my classroom was, to be early is to be on time. I stole this from somebody. To be on time is to be late. To be late is to be left. So I had to live up to that motto if I'm expecting my kids to do that. So get up early, get yourself going, start, right from the beginning. I had the wonderful opportunity of having both of my kids attend my high school and be in my programs. So they were frequently, for years, on my drive. And then when they were learning how to student drive and all that, I was in their drive and praying as we went to school. But so I would listen to music on the way. I would kind of go over my plans. I was a person that would never get to school and say, what am I going to do today? That was not in my makeup. It was, what am I going to do this week? What am I, it was always planned out. I'm a very, forward thinking person. Now, did you stay with those plans? No, obviously, especially with music, it changes. But so things were planned out. I would have time early, to meet with my co-partner. I had a co-teacher, and just go through the day and make sure everything was good, and then I felt like I was ready. We started with a music homeroom, which was really fun. So it was all the kids from the elite extracurricular groups that were in our homeroom. So a lot of times they would rehearse or something like that. So it was like, hit the ground running, there you go.
So, the person that took over for you, was that your co-teacher when you left?
No, unfortunately it wasn't. He retired a year before I did. So there was a new person that came in, and then I retired, and then there was kind of a, not a great transition. But now I just talked to him today. One of my former students is the teacher there. So, and he knows the tradition and the history, and he's doing a great job building everything back up, even in this pandemic world we're living in.
So, a legend left, and then it didn't work out for the following teacher. And then another teacher came in, is that right?
Yeah, there were two teachers the whole time, and it just didn't work until this previous student of mine took the reins, and then it's doing much better now, I'm happy to say.
How was that for you, watching that struggle after you left?
It was really hard. It was really hard because you work very hard to build up, the reputation and the kids' musical ability, and then to see it kind of just, is tricky. Yeah,
Mhm.
but you leave the keys on the desk and you go. It's up to somebody else. You can't be fiddling with it. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Did kids ever call you and ask for advice?
yeah, I kept in touch with kids all the way through. I don't think I ever gave them direct advice, except for just do your best, help wherever you can, talk with the teacher, communicate. Um, but yeah, and I have a Facebook page, Students of Christine Bass. And so I'm still in touch with so many of them, which is so cool to see. It's really fun for me. Glad to be
Mm.
living in a time when you can still touch base. And, they're all having babies and becoming doctors and they're on Broadway and I'm like, what, what happened here?
In your toughest teaching situations, what would you say was your finest moment?
It's, when you've been teaching as much as I have, to have one single moment stick out like that, as soon as I think of one, then I think of another, then I think of another. So I'm not just going to go on one. Okay. But they were almost always the same, where there was some sort of challenge or some maybe confrontation of, oh, music is being too important. Why do you want the kids to do all of this? That's not necessary. Or shouldn't you pick a smaller choir so that, we don't have to hire another teacher? Those things that were, like just kind of slaps in the face to your hard work and you were growing things. And they were like, no, 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 don't do that. That's not that important. Um, Things that occurred like that. And to look at it and say, you know, those are challenges. And whenever I was challenged, it was always kind of like, okay, what am I supposed to learn from this? What way can I rethink this to get around this obstacle? So every obstacle kind of became an opportunity. That was one of my mottos. And um, I had challenges like in the middle of my career at West. They went to open enrollment, which meant kids could pick either school. And there was one school. I was at the older, slightly lower income school that wasn't as privileged as the new big super school, which I had actually done my student teaching at, interestingly enough. And so I was like, okay, they're all going to bail and they're going to go to the big school with the reputation. But that didn't happen. Kids actually came to our school because of choir, which was awesome. But there were a lot of challenges. Every time we kind of grew, there was some kind of problem. Like we had a situation with our auditorium and our music room. When I came, there were 60 kids. When I left, there was 325. So in that interim, as we're building, the superintendent came to me and said, what can you do to tap this? We don't have enough funding to get another teacher or whatever. And I was like, so who are you going to tell can't sing? Is it the beginning kid who's been waiting to do this? Is it the kid who's advanced, who has worked and invested? Or is it maybe the kid in the middle who's working their way up? Who are you going to say, sorry, we had to cut choir for you? And they couldn't answer that. So they didn't cut choir. And eventually we had a situation where we couldn't fit in our auditorium. We couldn't take that many singers and that many audience members, that it just didn't fit. So then we had to go to the big school and have our concerts in their auditorium, which they were very gracious to us and everything, but it was a pain, And so because busing all those kids over and on all that whole thing.
Yeah, I'm sure that was challenging on all fronts. Sorry, go ahead, keep going.
As we went to this other school and had our concerts there, eventually the Board of Education saw, oh, wait, they need a big auditorium too, just like that one, because they have more kids and, this is a great thing for their school. So then in the next bond, new music suite, new auditorium for our school. So there were things and challenges and obstacles, but if I had just said, oh, forget it, I give up, I can't do it, and turn my back, we would have never really had the super things happen as a result. And so I think one of my messages to people who are in the career and pushing through those kinds of things is not to give up. to persevere and to look for another direction. When there's an obstacle, that means there's going to be provided another way.
Did you feel that the same things that motivated kids when you started teaching there was the same type of things that motivated near the end, or did you feel like kids changed over the years?
I think intrinsically they're the same. How it was wrapped, how it was demonstrated, how it was played out changed, because the kids definitely did change through the years. And that's one of the things with being a teacher that long, you see, oh my gosh, this is a whole different breed of student. But yet certain things like wanting to achieve, wanting to work hard, wanting to get better, wanting to make music really happen, those things didn't change. So you had to just find a way to maybe repackage the initial approach. But once you got them hooked, it was the same process pretty much over and over.
Who would you say is on your Mount Rushmore of conductors?
Well, that's really hard because I don't have just four, but I did pick four for you, okay? Because I knew that's what you're asking. Conductors, it would be Joe Flummerfelt, who was my conductor in the Westminster Choir at Westminster. And then my freshman conductor was Robert Simpson. And he was just an incredible man that you had to sing for and you had to sing right for. And he was bubbly and happy the whole time. And he got the passion out of the music. And that was in my freshman year. And I was like, I want to do what he's doing, and then I would have to say Anton Armstrong, who's been a lifelong buddy of mine and who I just respect his work so much. And I respect who he is so much. And then Jeffrey Redding would be another. And Jeffrey and I were the only high school conductors that were asked to conduct the All National. And I remember he did it first, and then I got the opportunity and I was like, I can't believe this. We're not supposed to be doing this. It's supposed to be the big guys that are doing this. And I've just always respected his work. I've always respected his humility, and he just is infectious with the kids. So I've had a chance to watch him work a lot too.
I was wondering about this. Is it ever annoying to you to be mentioned as the first woman to do something? Because I'm sure that you have so many accomplishments that you probably were the first woman to do that. Maybe the first woman to direct a all-state choir or honor choir like that and still be teaching high school.
Right.
Did that ever annoy you being mentioned as the first woman, or did you not see it that way, or did that not affect you?
I don't think so. Not for me. I don't pay much attention to it. I was raised with three brothers. So that kind of killed everything right there. I don't think about that as much. I think that's because I've always been taught and encouraged to be my best, and that did not depend on my gender. So I don't think it ever limited me. And I don't think it ever really motivated me that, I'm a woman, I have to do this. Now, I have had issues, and you asked, what were some troubles with working with some men who didn't like a woman who had strong ideas and positive and liked to move forward. Who'd rather you'd wait until they told you what to do and that kind of thing. So I had to kind of learn the ropes as far as doing that a little bit. And that was an interesting experience. I didn't always pass it real easily.
Did you ever feel that they were intimidated by the fact that you were a woman and better than them?
I wouldn't say better than them, but being a strong woman who is confident in her career can be very intimidating to some men.
Including administrators?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Just anywhere you look. I'm looking for, I'd like to take a trip to Africa. I'd like to do this. I'd like to do that. Why do you want to do all that? That kind of response with, why are you so ambitious about your students, for your students? So I think, I did face that. And I think it is, unfortunately, which is, it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be intimidating to have somebody who's well qualified work along with somebody else who is well qualified. That shouldn't be an issue, but some people do are intimidated by that.
Now, did you guys have a union?
Yes.
And did you lead that ever?
Oh no. I tried to stay far away from it. I mean, I joined it so that I didn't get ostracized, but yeah, it wasn't where I was putting my energy. I'll just put it that way.
I'm just guessing that you had a lot of sway when you would talk, whether it be union meetings or staff meetings.
I don't even think I ever attended a union meeting, but in staff meetings and in places, people did listen, but it was, I never tried to be like, this is the only way to do it. It's I'm a consensus builder. My father was big on that, and I'd like to make sure that everybody's at the table, everybody's heard, everybody is, and same with your students. It's not just, this is the word of the director. It's not. It's how do you think we can get better? What can I do? And asking for feedback from them. How can I get better? What can I do? Every honors choir that I conduct, I pass out little 3x5 note cards right before the last, right before we go on stage. And I say, write something to me, whatever you want. If you don't want to write something, draw me a picture. But I'm not going to see you again ever in my life, probably. And I want to know what this experience has done for you, or anything that I could do better to make it a better experience for the next kids that I do. I teach. And I still have all those piles and piles of cards. And I learn from that. And some of it is hard to take. Every once in a while you get a card that says, get some hair dye, or one of these kids, they gotta be kids, but I'm obviously not my white hair is not a problem. So I'm okay with that. I'm secure enough. But so some of the things, well, you came off too tough initially, and we thought you were too, demanding, or, I have to learn that. Maybe I did come off to kids that didn't know me from Adam, no pun intended, that I was too demanding or expecting too much right away. Maybe they needed more coddling. Maybe they were used to somebody that coddled them more, which is not my style. So I have to be aware of that. I also had to be aware of different areas of the country. Because if I did a Rhode Island, honors choir, or New York honors choir, I could say, let's get that, down to business, da, 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 da. If I did one in Virginia or South Carolina, I had to be much more, okay, how about it just made a difference in how you spoke, because that's how they were typically spoken to. And I didn't know that at first. So, oops.
And you're not saying those states are more coddled. You're just talking about the way you approach it.
It's just how it's your manner. And you want the overruling thing is you want to be effective and you want to guide them. But if I'm too, perceived as being too, businesslike and get it done, and I don't draw them in, and they need to be drawn in, then I've missed, a part of my opportunity. So I had to learn that, and I learned a lot of that through seeking input, through inviting input, which I think is something that has been something that I've always chosen to do. At the end of the year, please write me an evaluation. Please tell me how I can get better. And one of the things that the honors choir's kids said was, nobody's ever asked us this. We've never been in an honors choir where the director said, how can she do better? I was like, well, I value your input. A lot of times they just said it was amazing, blah, blah, blah. But, it was still a good chance for them to open up and air out their issues with me. And that's who I'm teaching. That's who I need to be aware of.
How did Robert Shaw not get on that Mount Rushmore of yours?
It was the timing of everything. He had been at Westminster right before I came. And so I wasn't directly influenced by him, although many of my mentors were. So later on, as I kind of, rounded the full circle, I thought, oh, this guy is really important, but I didn't have the personal contact with him. So that's probably how. Not that I don't respect him greatly.
Yeah. Joseph Flummerfelt's Oh, Danny Boy, off the charts. Let's talk about your parents a little bit. What were they like?
They were amazingly supportive. They were both psychology majors. So at our dinner table, and this was in one of your questions, it was, what did you learn from today? What was an obstacle? What did you, feel like the door slammed and you didn't succeed. Now, I don't know about most people's dinner tables, but they probably weren't that. And we would say, oh, everything was great, no problems, or yeah, that history teacher just didn't really hear what I had to say. And my parents would say, what are you going to do about it? And then we were really like, I don't know, we got to do something about, And so it would be a problem solving time. It would be that was a bad experience or a non-positive experience. How are you going to make it a positive experience? How are you going to fix that? And so consequently, I think one of the important things I learned from them was how to take a failure or take a shortcoming or take something that you didn't expect and make it something that you learn and grow from. And the next time you enter that same situation, you have more equipment and more tools to handle it. And so that's been crucial in my life and crucial in the lives of my music ed kids, especially at Temple when, you're teaching them and you're like, you're gonna fail. I hate to break this to you, but you're gonna fail. What are you going to do? You're standing up in front of kids. They're staring you in the face and you just blew it. How are you going to fix it? And are you going to learn to get back up on your feet and continue on? And if you don't have that experience, number one, and secondly, learn from those experiences and learn how to improve, then I think you're dead in the water as far as becoming a teacher, a good teacher, because that's how you learn. That's how you grow.
Let's talk a little bit about what you just mentioned, fear of failure. Michael Jordan said he feared failure, and that's what drove him to be so great. But we teach a lot, don't be afraid of failure, so you can put yourself out there and grow. Did you, as an educator or conductor, fear failure?
I think we all, in a sense, fear failure because we're not sure what's going to happen if we fail. But I think there's an element of a healthy fear and a disabling fear of a fear of failure that stops you from trying, stops you from dreaming, stops you from risk taking, or a fear of failure that advises you, I need to be really well prepared. You in some fantasy world, you can walk into a music class, open the music and start trying to teach it. I don't know who can do that, but I've never had success with that. I've always had to score study. I've always had to have a plan. I've always had to have a mode of attack. And if I didn't have that, I would definitely fail. But because I am afraid of that failure, that's a healthy fear. And so then I'm going to prepare. I'm going to do the best I can do to prevent a big failure.
Yeah, that's interesting. The fear of failure at the beginning of the process and then fear of failure at the end of the process.
Right. Or one that's disabling, one that says, don't try that. You can't do that. That's the fear of failure that I refuse to acknowledge. I'm a risk taker. Just tell me I can't do something and I'll prove you wrong. So I think that's something you mentioned, my parents. I think that's something that was just instilled in us as kids. Neither one of them were musicians, by the way, but they gave us musical experiences from like 4 years old on, and we all became musically, not professional musicians, but very good musicians, I would say, for our average Joe Smo family.
You would think that because psychologists are always asking, like, how do you feel about this? That might be interpreted as coddling, But your parents being psychologists, you weren't coddled, were you?
Oh no, never. And so I think that's probably, as a woman, the hardest thing for me to be myself with. I was not coddled. I came up with 3 brothers and 2 parents that asked, how can you make it right, Chris? What can you do? How are you going to fix this? And so when I get in a rehearsal and we stop, I say to them, what did we do wrong? If you can't analyze it, you're not going to fix it. And how can we make it better? And hopefully I've given them some skills so that they can have those answers and it can be their ownership of the idea. Well, we didn't phrase it the way we knew we should. We didn't put the syllabic stress here. We were way too loud in the beginning when it was piano, so we had no place to grow. If I get those answers from my singers, then I know we've got some education going on here and some ownership. If I stop and I say, now you didn't do da 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 da, then I'm not teaching. I'm, pointing the finger and telling them how they didn't succeed. That's not teaching.
Something that you just brought up that I think is a very important leadership lesson is how can I make it right? What were some situations that arose where you had to put that leadership principle into practice?
Oh, there were times when I didn't feel that the music was working and we had to step away and analyze it. There's one specific time in my high school choir where, because I had such a huge program, attracted kids that probably would not be normally in choir. So I had the jocks and the goof offs and the crazies. They were all in my choir, and they were musically talented. But somebody had to bring them in there and hone them in to get them to stand in a straight line, kind of thing. And so one day, as kids would be, they walked in. This is, class of 65, walked into the choir. And what I used to do is as soon as the bell rang, I would be like, we would be stretching and hissing because I wanted their mouths to be doing something musical and not still talking. So they heard the bell. It was like, Pavlov's dog, you started doing something. And there's about 5 or 6 boys, all sat in the back, decided, they weren't really going to do that. And so our warm up kind of, I waited and they got in gear. And then when we got to the music, they were again kind of not really focused. And I had about, 5 or 10 minutes of that type of lack of focus from some of the kids. And I just stopped. And you could hear a pin drop. And I waited. And it must have been, a good 60 seconds, but felt like 6 or 7 minutes, to those kids. And I finally said, I can't do this. This is not what we agreed on. This is not how this class operates, and we won't get anything done this way. Somebody help me figure this out. And I just stopped, and it got silent. And then some of those very same boys raised their hand. Well, Mrs. Bass, when we come in this room, you have a whole different level of expectation than in our other classes. And a lot of times we don't make that shift. And we're still back in the cafeteria or in gym class or even in science class, still goofing around. And we don't realize that you want something different for us to do what we've decided we want to do. And that was the discussion. And I thought, oh, this is golden because it's not coming from me. It's coming from you. That perception was new to me, that, what they experienced all day long was very different from what we were doing in the choral classroom. So that was important for me to know. So the next day I just stood at the door, and because they all agreed that they were going to try, and I just stood at the door and kind of went as they walked in, like magic dust. Here you go. Remember what room you're just walking into, and then it was, they understood, and then they got down to business, and we regained, the rehearsal etiquette that we had used before, and that has worked. But I had to just stop, ask the question, let them fumble around for the answer, and then we had to redirect. So yeah, I don't know.
That is very comforting to hear, because when I watched your vocal transformation DVD, I was like, oh my gosh, this choir's perfect. Like nobody's messing around or nothing.
Oh my goodness. No. See, that's interesting, because one of the reasons why I wanted to make that DVD was Randall Stroop was my buddy who encouraged me to make that. And I said, does anybody make this is not the perfect choir. This is how they sing. And how do you teach these kids how to sing? Or is it always the perfect choir doing the perfect exercise in the perfect situation? He said, I think there's only been one other high school, and it was a women's choir, and they did some things a little bit like what you're thinking, but I want you to do, take that kid, do, re, mi, fa, so, and change them. And that's what that DVD is all about. And so it was absolutely unscripted, and we left some things in there where, the kid said the wrong answer or somebody's nudging. And there, if you look closely, you'll see some non-cooperative moments, especially with my freshmen. And the older kids knew I was filming, so they were trying to, do the right thing. But I wanted to capture everyday kids in everyday situations and how you can move them through this vocal technique, you know, ladder so that they build their voices correctly. So they were not the perfect kids at all.
Yes, and I guess what I mean is you totally showed that you can transform normal kids. I guess I just didn't see kids just not participate or refusing to participate.
If you look carefully at some of my freshmen, because it was right in the very beginning of the year, you'll see a couple girls like this, you know, when I wanted them to do some of the kinesthetics, and they were kind of like, "Oh, I'm not doing that. I'm too cool," and that's okay. I ignore them and move on, and it all happens anyway. And then my second book, my first book, but my second project on the voice itself, the front loading your choral rehearsal, was another just clips of total first time rehearsals. No, I mean, most of the choirs didn't know me. I only did my women's choir from Temple, but then everybody else was, you know, who is this lady with white hair, you know, and what is she asking us to do? And it was that first, you know, initial try. So there was all kinds of back and forth with that. You know, there's one where there's a great choir in front of me, and there's only one girl that'll answer any questions. Everybody else is like, I'm not saying anything, you know. So, but they were all very real life situations, and I think when I go, you know, across the country and I give my workshops, that's what people appreciate more than anything else. You're taking what we see in class and real life situations and giving us ways to, you know, change them and better them. And it's not so kind of highbrow and theoretical. It's very, very practical, I think, is the word I get a lot.
So you recently retired. I'm assuming that's temporary until the pandemic is over. Is that right?
Who knows? Who knows? I'm really enjoying it. I have a private studio with, you know, about 12 students, and I do some choral dabbling in here and there. There's a little private school that I do some small ensembles with, and we do some things at my church. I'm not the choral director, but we do some things. So um, I don't know what's going to happen. I'm still going to do some honors choir things. I'm going to go to Korea. I was supposed to go to Korea this November, but I'm going to go next November and do a Pan Asian honors choir, which I'm really excited about doing. But so I'm hoping that I'll still get opportunities to do those kinds of things.
So as you were going through your mind about leaving Cherry Hill, uh, what was going on that maybe factored into that decision?
There were a lot of external factors that influenced me, but also I had met Rollo Dilworth, who had come and done a workshop with our kids, and each choir did a different Dilworth piece, and he had worked, and then he started bringing his music education students to observe the program, and it's interesting because the position that I took at Temple was his. As he became the administrator, I took his classes. So then I became the Rollo Dilworth for the music ed program, and he didn't do women's choir, he did a mixed choir, but yeah, so it was very similar. And so he caught me in the hall after a time that his kids were there observing, and he said, "We've got to get you to Temple. You know, what you're doing. Our kids need to know this. Our music ed kids need to see this." And I was like, I don't know, you know, and I just did my normal rehearsal that I would do and whatever passionate thing I had to express. So that was always in the back of my mind. If I retire, what I would love to do is teach teachers, because I'd had a ton of student teachers and I felt that very fulfilling to work with them and see them grow. So I always kind of had a part B. And then when he said that, I was like, okay, well, let me know if there's ever, you know, an opportunity.
But you had to decide to leave a very successful program. What factored into that part of it?
Yeah. Well, I had kind of created a monster. It was successful, and it was successful because it took every ounce of my energy to do it after a while. When it got to the national level and all the things that the kids wanted to do, and we need to go to this competition, we need to do this, and we, you know, and after a while, I was like, you know, I need to, you know, enjoy my life and my family, and not be so all consumed with my career.
What is your process for teaching choir? for vocal transformation to front loading?
Right. Well, I think this is an interesting journey for me because it started way back when I was first teaching and trying to figure out how do I communicate to these students who only sing, ah, they only sing from their throat. They have no concept of breathing, resonance, support, nothing. How do I get a kind of sequential thing building so that they'll grow? And so I found myself kind of using the same building blocks over and over. And then when Randall Stroop said, because he would come from Rowan and observe with his kids as well. And he said, you got to start packaging this up so that other people could benefit from it. And I was like, you're kidding me. But then I started to think about, well, what is it that I'm actually doing? And then I kind of broke it down into the what I call the 5 essentials of, posture, breathing and support, resonance, articulation. And I can't even remember the 5th one, so that's great. So then that's when I started to kind of analyze what were my building blocks. And I had tons of students to experiment on. They came in and they couldn't sing a lick, or they thought they could sing and then they were doing it all wrong. There was all these things. And just gradually kind of tweaking and whack-a-moling and figuring and giving them the tools, how can I relate to a singer who's, 13, 14 years old to use their body? What kinds of things do I need to do? And so I came up with, the abdominal attack, the all of that stuff. So we'd overuse it so that they could feel where it was. And so one of the things that I feel really strongly about is that there's a 3-pronged sensory connection that you have to explain it, intellectually. You have to feel it kinesthetically, and you have to hear it auditorily. So you have to kind of go around and around and hit all of those 3 things every time you do a concept to make sure that they really get that. So it's been my trial and error. And it's also been then with the front loading concept is so vocal transformation is really vocal technique, how to sing. Front loading is really rehearsal technique, how to build your rehearsals so that they're going where you want to go in performance and not just kind of like come what may. And then we get to the end, we've learned all the notes, we know the diction, we know where we're breathing, but it still sounds like paper, cardboard. Why doesn't it sound musical? Well, because you haven't taught musical. You've only taught notes, diction, phrasing, okay, or where to breathe. So the front loading, and I learned this the hard way. I'm 2 weeks before the concert and I'm trying to build in dynamics and they're singing everything at forte. Why? I rehearsed it all at forte. Their muscle memory, that's the way they sing the song. So I was like, duh, I need to ask that in the beginning. I need to front load the dynamics. I need to front load the style. I need to front load the expression of this piece right away before they have even formed any muscle memory or any other experience. So I'm really excited about that because the trajectory there takes you right into where you want to be. And Andre Thomas did a workshop and I was like, I'm going to steal this. He's like, here's your, perfection choir. This is what you want it to sound like. And here's where they start. And how do you get from this to this? And the answer is you teach. And Rollo was in the classroom. He's like, can you just say that again? You teach. Yes, that's how you get from there to there. My premise is you teach that from here, having this in mind. So you teach the dynamics in, you teach the phrasing, and you teach oh wait, this is the hushy part, so we're going to learn it with that. Or this is the declamatory part, so we're going to learn it with, whatever the style is. And I have found that really does change the end result. And it also changes how they own the music. Now, is it tricky? Yeah, it's very tricky if your kids are used to just learning notes, and they're used to you teaching that. And then you try to, shape it into something. But if you tell them, I'm going to try something a little different, we're going to see if this works. And you just take one piece and you try that. All of a sudden they're like, ooh, I sound way better on this piece than we sound on the other piece that we've been working on for the same amount of time. So it's a approach to rehearsal technique that you do. And again, in that book, there's 60 clips of me in front of a choir doing exactly what I'm preaching about. Okay. So you're seeing it in action. And it's like, okay, now I can follow that because she just showed me how to do it, which I think is something that's lacking in a lot of pedagogy for music educators.
Did you ever get pushback that, because sometimes I get pushback that my warm-ups are too long?
Warm-ups are what you're teaching. How to sing is what you're teaching. Uh, I mean, if I really, really try hard, I can do 8 minutes, but I'm usually 10 to 12 minutes out of a 42-minute period in warm-ups. But during those warm-ups, I am not just warming up the voice. I'm using the phrasing or the dynamics or the articulation or the style of the pieces that we're working on. So I'm already building into it so that when we get to the pieces, we do as what Rollo Dilworth said, we give them the tools for success. So they walk out of there thinking, ha, we did it, because I've prepared them. So if I want my basses to sing in the 3 Hungarian folk songs, John Brown's boots are polished so fine, and they're freshmen, and John Brown's boots are polished so fine, I'm not going to get that out of there by just trying it over and over. There's no magic dust you can sprinkle on that, but there is a way to teach it. We're going to teach a descending scale. First of all, I wouldn't teach an E major scale, which is I'd go back to C for those basses, and we'd be like do 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 do, and we'd be all about lifting those descending intervals, so that when we finally got to John Brown's boots are, John Brown's boots are, John Brown's boots are, then they have the skills to sing it correctly. They won't do it if you don't teach them in. So that's the whole concept of front loading, is how to actually get that to happen.
So this whole thing has been super encouraging. And, the reason I do this is to encourage people. And because you listen to people like you and Tim Lautzenheiser and Frank Battisti, it just makes like a fire in me just go. And I want others to feel that as well. So, what would be some advice or closing encouragement that you would have for our listeners?
There's so much. First of all, I have tremendous respect for all you're doing in this pandemic. And I know it must be 20 times harder than what I ever did. And I just spoke with the guy who replaced me at my high school. And I said, wow, how can you do all that? There's so much tech. There's so much non-music making that you're still rising above. So be encouraged. It will change back, eventually. But I think my biggest thing, my life motto, is to never give up. Just never give up. Don't lose hope. Just when things, are looking grim, or you've had 2 or 3 bad days, or the kids are really anti, and you've got to, don't lose hope. There is a way to turn that around, and looking for new ways for yourself to grow and learn. I think a lot of times, one of the things I always say when I see folks at a convention is, you're on the right track. You're here. You're here because you want to learn. You want to take something new back to your students. So don't ever stop learning. Don't ever stop growing. The other thing is, don't ever always be humble, and be ready to learn, and to know that you don't know. The more you know, the more you don't know. And I think that's one of the things from us old fogey music people we can say to you guys, don't be afraid. You don't know it. Go find out. Go ask somebody. Go get some help, because that's a big part of learning and growing. So not giving up, not letting your failures stop you, but let them guide you. Why didn't that work? How can I change it the next time? What can we do together? Input from the kids. And just to encourage everybody that, you get the privilege to make music with, to keep going and do it with all your heart. This is from Anton Armstrong, my good buddy. He says, to use all of who you are, your body, your mind, your spirit. And I would just say, to be all in. You can't sing without it coming from deep within. And so you got to tap that. You got to make it happen. I don't care if it's the easiest melody. I don't care if it's everybody singing unison, Danny Boy, whatever it is, it's got to be moving and expressing what that music should do.